people, it is desperate here. It is a desperate situation. There's no food, there's no water, there's no electricity, no ice, and it is deteriorating very rapidly. There is looting going on, not just in New Orleans, but in a small town like Bay St. Louis. Randy Kay, who was in Biloxi, also found a lot of people asking that same question. Where is the help? Here she is.
The difference also politically with 9/11. It's going to take the old FEMA and put it with, you know, the new bureaucratic agencies. It looks like no progress was made, and the key thing is lack of planning and lack of communication. In all the desktop studies that were done, all the run-throughs that they did, they went right up to the edge of planning for evacuation. They didn't really ever plan, block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood, for a true evacuation of this entire area, when if you look at it now, that's clearly where the focus should have been.
It's early to say this, but the selection of Michael Chertoff, mainly a prosecutor, a tough guy, a smart, good guy, in this massively administrative position, you wonder whether that itself was a leading indicator of the problem to come, that they saw the Homeland Security Department is primarily directed at a challenge politically from around the world, terrorism, rather than focusing as well on civil defense. Same agency, different responsibilities, but requiring this. Look at this. Can you imagine if we had a nuclear attack? I mean, who wants to think about it? But there'll be crowds like that.
And another difference in the situations is that in New York at 9/11, you had Rudy Giuliani, who had been a prosecutor also, as a matter of fact, but he also was a mayor. And he knew the sinews of the city. He knew everything about how to deal with emergency situations. It appears, as you look at the officials down there and the officials in Washington and in Crawford, that they didn't seem to understand what the problem was going to be.
Where was the face of our response to? You know, and Tom Ridge had the tough job of being the first Homeland Security boss. But you can imagine that this had happened on his watch. He would have been out there, I always compare it to a hockey goalie, you know, taking the puck. He would have been out there taking the heat from day one. There would have been a face to this response. There hasn't been a face to this response. There isn't a person in Washington that we say, the press hits every day and say, get going.
Chris, it's rather mysterious because George Bush had the same kind of training that Tom Ridge did, which is governor.
Right. With floods.
If you're a governor, you understand about disasters. Now, during the time that George Bush was governor, you know, there were some problems. There were forest fires, there were some storms, but I don't think he had this kind of anything like this kind of scale, but that's no excuse for him, his not understanding, especially after 9/11, where he performed so well after an initial hitch in the first few hours, explainable, understandable, to get out there. And it's going to be the 36 to 48 hours when they were slow in responding, when he was slow in responding, when he was invisible, when he was still on the ranch, when he was still doing political activities, that are going to be looked at by his critics, and they're going to be numerous. And let me say again, it's because out of the pent-up energy of criticism of this president that was kept locked away by concerns of patriotism and his role as commander-in-chief, and the fact that we were attacked by an outsider, and the fact that Osama bin Laden is lurking out there, none of those protections are there for him politically now in his second term, and he's going to have to stand and take this.
So smart. You mean a lot of people were afraid to tag the president for previous mistakes out of a fear of disuniting the country, and now it's us against bad weather, so you can do that.
Yeah, you can, and he's in a bureaucratic role, not a military one.
Well, I'm amazed the vice president hasn't been heard of yet either. I don't know where he is. I mean, it's odd. The vice president was all over the place during 9/11.
Let's go to CNN's Jack Cafferty. He's watching all of this, has been all week, and is clearly just as shaken as the whole country is. Jack?
Wolf, the war in Iraq is part of the problem in New Orleans. The Boston Globe reporting today that National Guard units across the country have about half their usual equipment, everything from helicopters, Humvees, trucks, weapons available to them, because all the rest of the stuff has been sent off to fight the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. There are 78,000 National Guard troops who are now deployed in those overseas war zones. Even the hardest hit states, Louisiana, Mississippi, have 40% of their National Guard troops in Iraq right now. What happens if there's a terrorist attack tomorrow or a massive earthquake in Southern California? How would the nation respond? It's a frightening thought. The question is this: if we're going to stay the course in Iraq, should the U.S. bring the National Guard home and institute a draft? Cafferty, file one word, CNN.com. We'll read some of your letters a bit later.
You know, Jack, 40% of the 138,000, 140,000 U.S. troops in Iraq, and this has been a relatively steady percentage, 40% are either National Guard or reserve, so-called weekend warriors, the citizen soldiers, but they've been playing a critical role in the war in Iraq.
Do you suppose, Wolf, that the arrival of the relief convoys and the political photo ops on the Gulf Coast happening at the very same time were a coincidence today?
Well, I'm sure our viewers have some thoughts on that as well. These pictures, by the way, Jack, that we're getting in, and I want to show our viewers, these are live pictures over at the airport. But I'm also looking at this other picture that we're getting in from our affiliate DSU and from Biloxi, Mississippi. Look at this, a final thought before I let you go.
It's embarrassing.
All right, that's
There was
final
once
thought.
city streets and thriving neighborhoods.
I hate the way they portray us in the media. If you see a black family, it says they're looting. See a white family, it says they're looking for food. And you know it's been 5 days because most of the people are black. And even for me to complain about, I would be a hypocrite because I've tried to turn away from the TV because it's too hard to watch. I've even been shopping before even giving a donation. So now I'm calling my business manager right now to see what is the biggest amount I can give, and just to imagine if I was down there, and those are my people down there. So anybody out there that wants to do anything that we can help with the setup, the way America is set up to help the poor, the black people, the less well off as slow as possible. I mean, Red Cross is doing everything they can. We already realize a lot of the people that could help are at war right now, fighting another way, and they've given them permission to go down and shoot us.
And subtle, but in even many ways more profoundly devastating, is the lasting damage to the survivors' will to rebuild and remain in the area. The destruction of the spirit of the people of southern Louisiana and Mississippi may end up being the most tragic loss of all.
George Bush doesn't care about black people.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.